Hi, guys. I'm back. I know it's been so long since I've made a podcast. Um, how many months has it been? Like 5 months? But hey, I'm back making podcasts because, as it so happens, I like to talk. So this is a pretty good platform for me. Chances are, just so you are aware of what's coming up, I will probably be changing the name of this podcast. So if you're watching this after I've changed the name, hi, hello, I did that. We'll see how that goes. But if you have any suggestions, if you're watching this before I've changed the name from calling you out, please feel free to DM me with any naming suggestions. I'm just going through my head and seeing if anything pops out to me. But for now, calling you out it is. So, in today's episode, I wanted to talk about imposter syndrome since that's one of the big things I talk about with people. And more specifically, I wanted to dig into what imposter syndrome really is, why it happens, particularly in business owners, because I gear towards business owners. Hopefully, most of you listening are probably business owners. If you're not, that's fine. Hi, hello, welcome. Good life stuff you're still going to learn here. But I did still want to talk about what imposter syndrome is, what causes it, all of that good stuff. And then the types of imposter syndrome, because here's the thing, right? We like to throw the term imposter syndrome around, and like a lot of words we use in daily life, at some point we almost feel numb to it. It's kind of like, what even is imposter syndrome? Like, it feels like a brand name at this point, kind of like authenticity. I've realized is something that some people are just like, okay, everyone uses that word, but what the fuck does it really mean? Like, in what context? So I'm going to contextualize imposter syndrome for you guys so you know exactly what it really is, if it really applies to you, which it probably does because it does for most people. And we're going to go through the types of imposter syndrome because that's a lot of fun and it tends to contextualize things for people. They'll be like, oh, wait, I relate better to this type of imposter syndrome. That's why I sometimes felt like I didn't have imposter syndrome that everyone else was talking about, right? So I am going to talk about that. I did actually talk about this in a podcast with my good friend Leah. She does the podcast Candid Confidence. If you aren't already subscribed to that podcast, I do highly recommend it. Just so you also know, I'm going to be posting these podcasts on YouTube as well, so you can see my face. So people watching on YouTube, hi, that's me. I'm here. I haven't done YouTube videos in a long time, so I'm gonna have to get used to like talking to my microphone and also talking to the camera. I'm gonna try my best to just talk to the camera so it doesn't look weird as I'm like, if you can see the camera right now, I'm like leaning into my microphone awkwardly, which you can't even see on camera. It's right there. Anyway, just wanted to let you guys know that. So my channel is Domi the Authenticity Coach, so you should be able to find me. That is also where I'm posting all the replays of my monthly events, so you should be able to find them there. And I did actually talk about these types of imposter syndrome at my last monthly event that I held in February. So if you wanted to kind of see more about that, you're welcome to go check that out. Anyway, enough with that promotion stuff because I want to get into the meat. Awesome. Okay. Let's talk about what imposter syndrome really is. First of all, just as a fun little note, I like to give my imposter syndrome a name. Mine's named Donald. Yes, after you know who, you know, Donald Rump. It rhymes with rump anyway, basically. You know what I'm talking about. Anyway, can't help it. Couldn't help it, but it just made sense to me. So that way I can tell Donald to like go into a corner and I can yell at him. It's just fun to give it a name because it first of all kind of can make it a little bit funny and also can separate it from yourself. So first little thing. But let's talk about what imposter syndrome really is, right? And there's a lot of different definitions out there. I took mine from apa.org just because I felt like it kind of was the simplest to understand. And basically, it's the psychological pattern. So, yes, it's happening in your head in which someone will doubt their skills, their talents, their accomplishments, and has this persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. That's usually the part that gets people. They're just like, wait, I'm not scared of someone like pointing out that I'm a fraud, but it kind of goes a little bit deeper, and usually it's a much deeper fear than we realize, and it can show itself in many ways. The idea being, again, that like we feel like our skills, our talents, our accomplishments are not enough to prove that we are perhaps good enough at the thing that everyone around us or people around us or seem to think we are. So for example, how this might manifest is that someone might look at us at success. So maybe they get straight A's and think, oh, it's just luck. oh, I'm just smart. Oh, and I know it, again, it manifests itself differently for everyone. But they'll usually chalk it up not to a representation of their skills, their talents, their accomplishments, a good thing for them, but sometimes chalk it up to, something that's external from them. It wasn't them. It was luck. It was the universe. It was God. It was a variety of things. And what happens then is that we're afraid that at some point we're going to fail. Those skills will not prove to be as good as others or we thought. The talent's not really that talented. The accomplishments were just a fluke. And we end up failing at something perhaps, and therefore will be exposed as, oh, well, they weren't actually that talented. This talent is without, they weren't as skilled as we thought. And this shows up a lot in business, especially because we're going in and we, in a sense, like when you go into business, you have to prove to others that you're the person they should be going to. And so that can scare people away from showing up as an authority. It can scare people away from taking on clients. It can cause a lot of problems. This imposter syndrome often does occur in high achievers. So if you were a straight A student, honor roll person when you were growing up, that sort of thing, this happens a lot for people like people like that who are unable to maybe internalize and accept the success they were getting. It just seemed expected. It wasn't a cool thing. It was just like, oh, well, that's how it should be. Which is, again, another way of kind of putting it off of like, oh, we did a good thing, and just making it, well, it was expected, of course, right? Not a good thing, just expected. But this does still happen in people who maybe weren't high achievers as well. So we're going to kind of talk about that because the different types of imposter syndrome really do address some maybe of our history of how we handled success in the past. And a lot of this does have to do with how we handle success and failure, or how we have in the past handled success and failure, and how that affects us now. So start to think about that and how that showed up in your past. And it's going to, again, show up differently for everyone. So let's talk a little bit about why it happens and how it kind of shows up. And I know we're getting real technical and psychological and all this stuff in this episode, but super, super helpful. And we're going to get to the types soon, but I wanted to make sure we cover this kind of overarching stuff first. Why does it happen? So imposter syndrome will happen usually because we might equate things like happiness, love, and worthiness, which are all great feelings that we want to have, but we'll equate them to acceptance, achievement, and likability. So basically, we feel like we perhaps can't be happy, loved, or worthy if we are not accepted, likable, and have achieved things. So what that often means is that like we will aim to be likable, we will aim to be successful and achieve things, we will aim to be accepted because that we think that's the only way we can be loved, we can be worthy, we can be happy, when that is in fact not the case, obviously, but psychologically that's how we're doing. And you can probably think of times, if you're listening to this, you can probably think of times in your life when that has happened. You can probably think of times when you aim to be likable because you wanted to be loved. You aim to succeed in things because you wanted to be loved and you wanted to feel worthy of that love. Or you thought that, being accepted and being likable would make you happy. And as we know, that isn't always the case, unfortunately. Why else does this happen? So there's usually some expectation to succeed. I kind of touched on this one. This expectation that we need to succeed in some way, whether that's getting straight A's, whether that's showing we can hit a certain income goal, whatever that might be. And that expectation can come from society and it can also come from ourselves. I think it's really important to understand that it can come from both places. And you'll often find what you thought might have been someone else's expectation of you or a societal expectation is usually just your own expectation that you've put on yourself and you're trying to put it on someone else. So that's something to kind of think about. Like, for example, I realized that my parents never expected me to get straight A's. It wasn't like some expectation that was like, oh, she has to. That was all me. And I learned that later down the line. I remember being like, wait, what? But I always put it on them because it just made it easier sometimes to do that. Okay, let's keep going. Why else does this happen? This is a really important one to understand for a lot of us, but sometimes, especially for the high achievers, if you're a high achiever, this is going to be really important. but sometimes a lack of exposure to failure can cause something like this. So for those of us who were high achievers, who maybe got a lot of straight A's, on a roll, we did well in sports, anything along those lines. I know I certainly was a high achiever in many aspects of my life. And so that meant that I wasn't really exposed to failure that often. So when I was exposed to failure, it caused me to shut down a little bit. I'd be like, oh, whoa, wait a minute. I am now a fraud just because I failed at one thing. And so usually if you're in this camp, you would reject failure at all costs. You'll probably avoid anything in which you might fail. So if you were a high achiever, that's probably you. You've probably had that thought before. Doesn't mean you're not growing out of it, because hopefully at some point you would. But it is something that a lot of us do struggle with. If you were not a high achiever growing up, chances are this might not be you. But, again, when I say high achiever, by the way, it doesn't have to be just like straight A honor roll. It can also be in sports. It can be in some other aspect of life. And then, of course, this also happens because of our comparison to other people. Just naturally, what humans do, we compare ourselves to the people around us and what's considered most normal. And with social media, that becomes even more prevalent because now we see more and more people. And in fact, we're seeing a more curated version of people more often. So that becomes normal to see certain body types and certain faces and all of that, even though it's curated and even edited to some extent. So again, we compare ourselves to people around us and on social media. And like I said, what we see most often becomes our normal. So if we're seeing like super, super successful, beautiful, like model people all the time, that's going to seem normal to us, even though maybe logically we understand it's not. Even though we probably heard the words that like, that's not fully normal. That's what we see. And that's what becomes normal. And if you don't look at yourself most often, this is why I preach mirror work to people. If you don't look at yourself often enough, you'll never think that you are normal. You'll always notice the things that are off about you because your face, your body is not considered normal in your brain because you've been looking more at other people. So I always preach mirror work for working on comparisonitis, which is just as simple as either looking at yourself in a camera or looking at yourself in a mirror for long periods of time and watching yourself move, dance. Any performer does this. Like dancers dance in front of a mirror, actors practice in front of mirrors, or practice in front of cameras. Like this is a very common thing for performers because you want to understand and you want to know how your body moves when you talk, when you move your arms, the way your face looks, the way you smile, all that stuff helps for any sort of performance. And it's kind of a similar aspect here. So obviously, if you're a performer, you want yourself and your body to be normalized in your brain because that helps you understand how to move it. So same concept in life. So if comparisonitis is a problem for you, I do recommend mirror work a lot. All right, so we're going to move on to the types in just a moment, but I do want to preach that one of the very first things that you will ever do to kind of overcome imposter syndrome is to be aware of it, be self-aware, recognize what you're doing when that sort of imposter syndrome hits, when that feeling of, oh my God, I am not as good as people think I am not that talented, that was just luck. Like recognize when you're saying these things, recognize what you say to yourself, because we all say things differently. Like try and literally journal, write down, like, what do I say to myself that causes me to doubt myself, and be able to recognize when that comes up, and recognize what's making it worse. So if you have, for example, mental illness like anxiety, OCD, that sort of stuff that might be exacerbating some of these thoughts. Recognizing that is also part of that self-awareness that will kind of help you overcome a bit of that imposter syndrome, or help you at least understand how to manage it, because it doesn't always go away right away, right? Recognize if you're getting a lot of overwhelming thoughts, if you struggle from perfectionism, if you struggle from fear, whatever that might be. So the more you can be aware of how you react, what things you say, and what issues might be exacerbating the problem, the better it's going to be and the easier it'll be to actually overcome the issue and the root causes of them. Always digging deeper. So let's talk about these types of imposter syndrome. Oh, this is my favorite part. Okay, so I like talking about these because I find that people really, really, really like them. I'm gonna take a sip of water real quick. Wow, my throat gets dry. Anyway, So let's talk about the types of imposter syndrome. I'm going to explain what each of them are. You're going to find that you're probably going to relate to more than one of them. You could relate to all of them. You could relate to only one. I find that I relate to, I think, 3 of the 5, and there's technically more you can probably find online. I just figured I found these were the simplest and the best, in my opinion, but you can probably look up more. And I might include more in my repertoire. If you find one that you're just like, I really relate to this one, let me know so I can add it to my little what I do. Anyway, types of imposter syndrome. So the perfectionist is the first one. This is the person who will set unrealistic expectations and then, get upset at themselves and punish themselves if they don't achieve those expectations. It becomes this like weird self-fulfilling prophecy where they set these super, super lofty, like not even attainable goals, and then get mad at themselves when they can't do it. They tend to be controlling of their environment. They want to control the outcomes so much. That's why they set those unrealistic expectations. Or they feel like that's what the expectation they're setting is what they should be hitting. So that's why they're setting them too, and why they're so controlling of their environment. So it's the kind of person who maybe has a really hard time getting a VA because they're afraid to lose control of what they're doing. They want things to be exactly perfect the way they are. I definitely relate to this one, by the way. I'm absolutely the perfectionist. And though you'll find that the perfectionist will rarely find success satisfying. So when they succeed at something, and this is again often people who maybe got straight A's on a roll as well, you'll find that when they succeed at something, when they actually hit a goal, they're already looking on to the next one. Maybe they feel like it didn't feel the way that they were hoping. Maybe they're like, oh, well, it was just luck. Like I hit it, but this doesn't feel the way that I thought it should. It's not perfect. It's not the perfect success. Because what you often find when you hit goals is, again, when you get somewhere, it's kind of like the whole, grass is greener on the other side. You get there and you realize it's not as green as you thought. That's very much the perfectionist's world. They're always almost looking at a greener pasture and then realizing it's not what they thought. And so they don't find the success as satisfying because they're looking forward to the next pasture already. So I'm going to recommend, if you are the perfectionist, this is like me. And this will often affect, like, obviously your work. You're going to find yourself maybe nitpicking every post you make, not posting things because it's not perfect. You'll find yourself, what else would it be? It's a lot of like not posting or not doing things because it's not perfect yet. Constantly perfecting your processes and all of that because that's an easy thing to fix, and like really, really nitpicking at it. And what I urge you to do if you were kind of stuck in that perfectionist route is give yourself a challenge. And I did this for a client recently, to post or do one thing this week that is not perfect, and deliberately post it because it's not perfect. Or because you maybe think it's not perfect. So whether you could give yourself a challenge of being like, okay, I'm going to make a post in an hour and it has to be done in an hour. If it's not done, it's going up anyway. Whatever that challenge might look like for you. But I'm giving you that challenge to do that, and to do that consistently. And what you'll end up finding is either there's no difference in how people react, which shows you that you might as well be spending less time with all this stuff and not wasting time nitpicking. You'll also find that it might even show you that people prefer the imperfect stuff you're posting. They're like, oh, wait, this sounds more like you, or this, you have more personality in it, perhaps. It'll kind of force you, especially if you give yourself a time limit, to just be you, because you're so focused on getting the thing done that you're just going without thinking too much about it. So I'm just going to urge you to do that. That doesn't mean that you should never think too much about it, because the good thing about being a perfectionist is that you care. You want things to be good. You don't want to put things out there with mistakes. That's totally fine. But definitely give yourself a challenge to do things that are imperfect, because I feel like I've probably talked about this before, and I've definitely talked about it on Instagram. Messy action is better than inaction, because if you do nothing, or if you do very little and you're not consistent, then you're going to find that's never going to get you to those goals that you've set yourself, especially those unrealistic ones, as much as the messy action is. The imperfect stuff is going to get you there faster. So if you're looking for that greener pasture, then bam, messy action. That's going to get you there better. So that's just my recommendation for you perfectionists out there. It is definitely something that I am working on myself. But let's move on to the next type. If you guys, by the way, are relating to this, please DM me, send me an email, whatever that might be. I would love to hear from you and see which ones of these you're relating to, or share it with someone who you know could use this. So the next type of imposter syndrome, thankfully not me anymore. I have definitely grown out of this one, but I know a lot of people who are stuck in this, especially service providers like VAs. And actually coaches. I will say coaches get stuck on this one too. And this one's called the expert. These are the people who are just learning. They have this constant fear apparently of inexperience or lack of knowledge. They feel like they just don't know enough in order to do the thing they want to do. So they're going to constantly learn until they feel like they are now skilled enough to be able to offer the service or the product or whatever it is. These are the people who are taking courses, certifications, coaching all the time without actually putting themselves out there and making sales yet because they don't think they're ready. These are the people that are constantly feeling they're not ready. And so they're constantly learning. They're downloading all the freebies. If you relate to this, and I'm sure as a new business owner, you probably can relate to this at least a little bit, like in the beginning of your business. This is one that thankfully entrepreneurship is great at getting you out of, because eventually every entrepreneur learns that you can take all the course and stuff you want, but if you don't do anything, it doesn't get you anywhere. So if you're far enough in your business, maybe a few months, maybe 6 months, maybe a year, and you have learned this lesson too. Hi, I learned this lesson as well. And if you're just starting, then just know that you will get past this one, because entrepreneurship is a great tool to get past this expert imposter syndrome feeling. And again, the expert will often, what ends up happening is they'll stay in their comfort zone of learning rather than doing, because again, it's the fear that they're just not ready yet. I'm not skilled enough. I'm not talented enough. I don't know as much. And it usually has to do with comparing yourself to other people. You're like, wow, they know so much. I feel like I should know this. And this happens with me too, occasionally. Like sometimes I'll run into mindset people who I'm like, oh my God, wait, they seem so much smarter than me at all this mindset shit. Should I be taking an NLP course or whatever other mindset things I feel like I should be doing? And then sometimes I have to sit back and be like, no, I do things my own way. I can still learn, but I'm still going to keep going and doing. So, just if you're stuck in that zone of learning and maybe even frustrated, like, why is nothing happening? Look back and, like, again, if you're frustrated, no, nothing's happening in your business, definitely look back and see how much time are you spending on learning, which is still really important. Definitely always be learning. But how much time are you spending on that versus doing, versus reaching out to people, making connections, all of that stuff that's actually going to get you clients and business. Because there has to be a good ratio between the two. You can't be doing one necessarily more than the other. And in fact, I would recommend, especially in the beginning, like you learn for a little bit, then do a lot of doing, and then you can balance it back out. My recommendation, just because in the beginning, the more you do, the more, like, I guess, momentum you'll have. And then you can balance it back out and start relearning things again, because we always have to do that. Awesome. Cool. Let's move on. If you relate to that one, definitely let me know. All right, let's talk about the next type, which I love this one. It's kind of me. I'm slowly starting to move out of it. This is almost the opposite of the expert in a way, but you can still have both. And this is called the Superwoman. This is the person who is a workaholic. They are addicted, and you'll often find, and if you think that you're a workaholic and you don't relate to this, I want you to think really carefully about this. The Superwoman is generally addicted to the validation from working, not exactly the results. So they feel like the act of doing is productive. They're like, oh, when I'm doing things, I feel productive. But they're not really always looking at the results from it. So maybe if you're a Superwoman, you might recognize that, I'm doing all this stuff. Like in the long term, I'm doing all this stuff and that feels good. Like I'm being productive, and yet nothing's happening, because what you'll often find is that you're focused on working on the wrong things. You're focused on doing the tedious work. You feel like you always just have to be working. And what ends up happening is you end up working on the stuff that isn't helping you. But you're doing it because you feel like if you're not doing anything, then you're not worthy of clients. You're not being productive enough. You should be doing something in your mind. And something that I have recently learned and have been trying to incorporate is that I am worthy even if I'm not doing. Because chances are you have done quite a lot, and sometimes you just have to be patient. You cannot, and this kind of ties into the perfectionist piece too, the controlling bit. You can't control when clients and people come to you. Sometimes you have to be patient and let the fruits of the outreach you've done, the connections you've built, the posts you've made, you have to let that stew and simmer and have effects down the line. So the Superwoman will also often get anxious when they're not working. So you're gonna find, and this is totally me. It's like you'll find that you're not doing something, and you feel like, okay, well, I need to be productive. I have to do something. And so the Superwoman will often be the kind of person who almost gamifies self-care. It's like in order to feel productive, they'll like turn self-care into like a thing on their checklist, a thing they have to do. Like, okay, 30 minutes in the bath, now I'm going to put a face mask on, and now I'm going to do 10 minutes of stretching. And all of a sudden it becomes like a chore or a task they're doing in order to reach a goal, rather than something that they need to do to relax, to stop doing. And also in the Superwoman, what often happens too is that criticism could turn into a huge blow. So you'll naturally find, like, especially if someone criticizes their way of working, like if someone tries to tell you, it'll be like, well, why are you working so hard? You shouldn't do that. That would often get on a Superwoman's nerves. Someone critiques something that they've worked really hard on, even if they might logically understand that it's critique, it's what happens, that could still be offended by it. They could be upset about it because they feel like they worked really hard. So again, that's the Superwoman. I've seen a lot of those, and I definitely still fall under this category. Absolutely. Sorry, I was drinking water. Let's move on to the next type. Remember, if you do relate to the Superwoman, definitely let me know in my DMs or anywhere else where you can find me. All right, or email me. Types of imposter syndrome number 4. We're on 4 of 5. This one's the natural genius. Ooh, this is a fun one. This is like with the perfectionist and natural genius are definitely the most me, I feel like, in a way. Perhaps it's Superwoman and natural genius. I'm really not sure. It's kind of a little bit of a lot of things. But the natural genius is the one who these are the high achiever ones. We're touching on this again. They likely grew up with straight A's, honor roll, succeeding really well in sports. Like there was something they were really, really good at, if not everything. Someone who maybe took a lot of AP classes in high school, was in the IB program, whatever that might be. Skipped a grade. I don't know. There's a lot of different ways this could show up. These are the people who, because they grew up that way, often believe, and it's usually a self-expectation they've placed on themselves that they feel like is external, but it's actually themselves doing it. They believe that they have to be naturally good at everything because they were naturally smart, naturally athletic, naturally whatever it might be. So what ends up happening for these kinds of people, and again, this might not relate to you, but this is definitely part of me. If you're this kind of person and you run into something that maybe you aren't naturally good at, you probably will avoid that sort of activity like the plague. You'll immediately be like, oh, I'm not good at, okay, I am not good at this. I'm not going to touch it. I'm not going to go back to it. So for example, if you were a complete straight A student and you did so well in academics and every academic thing came easily to you, maybe a little bit of artsy stuff came really easily to you, and next thing you know, you go and play sports and you fail miserably. Maybe you were the person that was like, well, I'm never playing sports again. Like, fuck that. I hate it. That's how that could show up. So that's one example of how that could show up. I know for me personally, it showed up in terms of specific academic stuff. I got straight A's naturally. I did really, really well in sports. I was also, artistic, and I wrote music and I could sing and like all this other stuff. And it felt like I should be naturally good at pretty much everything. So then I discovered in terms of music that I was not good at sight reading, for example, which is the act of looking at a sheet of music and basically like reading it on sight and being able to sing it without someone playing it with you. And I learned I wasn't great at that to start. And I immediately was like, well, I am never joining the all-state choir. Nope, because I can't sight read and I refuse to do it. I eventually did break past that and learn it, but that was definitely like an initial instinct of mine that was like, I'm going to avoid this because I suck at it and I don't want to fail. So I think I also did that when it came to learning languages. I found I wasn't great at just picking up languages. And that's something I'm still trying to get past because it's so easy for me to be like, I'm just not good at it because I, for some reason, I just can't pick it up as quickly as other people. And I really have to work at it. And that makes me avoid speaking in front of other people and practicing with other people and all of that stuff, which obviously hinders progress. So those are just examples from my life. If you also fall into this category, definitely start to think of examples of how this has showed up in your life. And the best way to get past this one is you really have to push yourself. You really have to push yourself, do that thing that you're not naturally good at so that you can become good at it. You have to unfortunately tap into what a lot of other people who weren't great at things, naturally great at the things you were great at, tap into their grit and determination and use that. Because unfortunately for people like us who were kind of perhaps more like, again, some things came more naturally. That wasn't the case for everyone, but they learned that grit and determination it takes to learn things and to get better at them over time rather than just be good at them right off the bat. And unfortunately, people in this category, people like me, people like you perhaps, can also unfortunately fall into the category of people who are good, but not great, if we aren't careful. Because we were naturally good at things, but we didn't want to push ourselves so hard so as to fail if we tried to, keep going. This happens a lot. So again, that whole thing, if we get to a point where we realize we're not good anymore, we'll stop ourselves to stay within our comfort zone. So if you fall into this category, your best bet is to continue to push yourself out of your comfort zone and do things in which you might fail. Really expose yourself to failure, almost make it a thing, make it a point to fail. Almost go so hard that you're going to fail so miserably. But that is honestly the best way you're going to learn if you're in that category. So I just had to put that out there. Last type of imposter syndrome. We're almost done, guys. Last type of imposter syndrome is the soloist. This is the person who believes that asking for help reveals that fraud in them, reveals their phoniness or inferiority. Because again, all comes down to we're afraid of being exposed in some way, right? We're afraid that someone's going to expose us as not being talented, not being skilled, being some fraud in that area we're in, right? So this is the person that might be afraid to ask for help, in part because they think that, well, if I ask for help in this thing, then I'm naturally exposing that I am inferior to this person, or I am naturally exposing that I'm not good at this thing. And this particularly happens in the area in which maybe you are teaching other people. If you're a coach, let's just say that you're a business coach. You might be afraid to get a business coach. If you fall into this category. Or if you're a mindset coach, you might be afraid to get your own mindset coach. If you're a VA, maybe you're afraid to get someone to help you with your website, work on your system, all of that stuff. And you do it all on your own because you feel like you should be able to do it and you don't want to prove in any way that you are inferior or phony. I thankfully do not fall into this category. I think there are some pieces of me that do, and I think we can all relate to all of these in some way. I thankfully do not fall into this category. Because I'm not always, but at least in my business, have been really good at asking for help and understanding that even though I'm a mindset coach, I need my own mindset coaching because let's be honest, we can help other people objectively because we are a third party. But when it comes to ourselves, there's only subjective bias towards ourselves, whether that's towards our website, whether that's towards our mindset, whether that's towards our business strategies, because it's all in our heads. So the best way to separate that and get a third party objective view on what we're doing is to have someone else help us with it. And when I was doing websites, I even got someone to do my website for me. I was like, I know I build websites. And this was a year ago. I'm I know I build websites and I like building websites, but I keep changing mine. I keep feeling like it's imperfect. I'm just going to have you do it because I cannot do this for myself. But this is a common thing. It's a lot of us, it's for ourselves, it's a little bit trickier. So if you fall into this category of soloist, just in general, you might believe that asking for help again will reveal your phoniness. You'll find that you're exceedingly independent. You think you can do everything on your own. And that isn't to say you can't to some extent. It just might not be the most efficient way to do things. And I know not everyone wants to hear efficiency, but let's be honest, like especially if you're feeling impatient at all about where you're at, efficiency is helpful. It really is. The soloist might also fall under the category of someone who might refuse help when it's offered to them, because they might see it as a criticism of their abilities, like basically an attack on their pride. And I know you have to kind of dig deep in yourself to see how you react. So imagine that someone has offered you help. Why do you turn it away? Think about that. I know for me in the past, this has definitely been a thing where someone's offered me help and I've been a little bit angry, especially the more they offer it to me, because someone's like, no, I can do this. I've already told you I can do this. Leave me alone. But I realized it was just, I felt like they were seeing me in a light of like, oh, she needs help. Therefore, like they must be seeing me as, if they're seeing me as someone who needs help, then I must be letting off this like vibe of like, I can't do this. And that would frustrate me and that pissed me off, honestly. So if you fall under that category, you have to kind of learn to detach yourself from those assumptions about what others see in you. We really have to kind of learn it, because oftentimes people are offering their help. They might have noticed that we're struggling a little bit, and that could be a sign that we do actually need help. Like, okay, if you're showing that you're anxious and stressed and struggling, maybe you do need help in some way. So think about that rather than seeing it as some weird criticism on you. Like, see if you can take advantage of it instead. There's a lot of different ways to kind of get past this one, but really the best thing you can do is find someone that you really, really vibe with who can help you on a specific thing that you need help with. Therefore, you can still take care of things you want to take care of and you're more independent in, and you can still have control over it. But you can still release control of something. And that'll slowly help you to understand the benefit of receiving help. So those are the types of imposter syndrome. I know I didn't give tips for all of them. I gave for some, but I think some of these we can definitely figure out. Like, for example, Superwoman. If you have that workaholic attitude, the best thing you can do for yourself is to try and give yourself even just 5 minutes where you're not doing anything productive, quote unquote. Like whatever that might be. It might just be lying down staring at the ceiling. Like, just give yourself little bits of time to just get used to the idea of not doing anything and start to see what good might come of it. Because I found in the times that I've been working on that I guess I somehow get clients all of a sudden during the times I'm not necessarily doing anything productive, or I'm just having fun, or whatever it might be. And I find, oh, a client just showed up, even though I've been working my ass off for like the past 3 days. All of a sudden now I'm not doing anything and a client shows up. It's a weird manifestation thing, but it does work. But yeah, those are the types of imposter syndrome. I hope that this has helped you kind of clear your mind and understand imposter syndrome a little bit better, maybe understand even better how it shows up in your life, specifically contextualizing it. Super, super helpful. At least I think it's helpful. So I hope it was helpful to you. If you relate to any of these types, please let me know. And yeah, like I said, I'm back. Domi is back on track with these podcasts. So you should be seeing a new one every week. Posted whenever the frick I feel like it, probably Fridays, who knows. And I'm going to be talking a lot about mindset tricks. I'm going to be talking about my story. I'm going to be bringing on guests. Who knows? I don't know. I'll kind of see what comes up as we go. But if you have any suggestions on what you would like to hear me talk about, or if you would like to be a guest on my podcast, please feel free to reach out to me. I would love to talk to you. And yeah, thank you guys so much. Remember to follow me at The Authentic Domi on Instagram for more tips, tricks, and of course, any and everything that I am offering as well. At this current moment, I currently have a mastermind. It's called the Baller Mastermind. It's for female entrepreneurs who are dreamers and visionaries, self-identified dreamers and visionaries, who really want to boss up in their business, who want to show up consistently, who want to learn how to build a business that they love. first and foremost. So if that is you and you want to build a business that makes you excited and that you really, really like, and are willing to put more effort into, and that doesn't maybe like stress you out to the extreme and almost make you doubt yourself, then this is going to be the mastermind for you. It's a 4-month mastermind, lots of group calls, lots of one-on-one calls. We have a lot of fun. And it's open for enrollment on a rolling basis now. So you can basically join whenever you would like. So if you are interested in joining that, then please DM me, go to my website, because I think I have a link there as well. Whatever you'd like to do. And I'd love to tell you more information about that. So thank you so much for joining me today. And I will see you all next week. Bye-bye.